Good evening. It's good to see everyone here on this Sunday morning. We are looking at the crucifixion of Jesus this morning, finishing that up. We didn't get the opportunity to finish it last week, and so we're going to try to get through that today, and we're going to try to see if we can get into and finish the supernatural phenomena that occurred as well. If I remember correctly, where we last left off is the fact that we talked about uh, the thief on the cross, and we talked about why it was very much not likely that any of us could be saved like that today, and all that revolves around uh, what the scriptures teach concerning salvation for us today, and even how we can answer some of the statements that individuals make about him, such as, well, he wasn't baptized. Can't prove that any more than I can prove that he was. The fact of the matter is, he knew the preaching of the kingdom, the fact that Jesus could forgive sins while he was here on earth, and just the fact that he was under the old covenant when this occurred. So there's a lot of things that, point to the fact that man can't be saved like that today. Not to mention, there's the teachings of the scriptures in general. But having moved through this, we notice the fact that there are a number of different witnesses, and we'll point out these same individuals in the next section as well. But there are more than just witnesses who are mocking, who are crying out blasphemies. There are witnesses at this time who are filled with sorrow. Mary, her sister, Mary, the wife of Cleophas, Mary Magdalene are here. They see his suffering. They hear his tormentors. And you've got to imagine how Mary, the mother of Christ, feels at this moment as she sees her son writhing in pain. But I also can't help but think of Jesus at this moment, in the fact that through all of this, through all the pain, through all the torment, through all that he's dealing with, his mind is focused somewhere else. It may make us wonder why Jesus does what he does next to an extent, but something we've got to remember is that Mary is a widow. And while Mary does have other children, we realize the fact that Jesus wants to make sure that his mother is cared for. Not to say that he doesn't think his brothers and wouldn't do that, but even during this moment, he wants to make sure that his mother is cared for. His mind is not on himself, but on others. And so he looks to his mother, sees the disciple whom Christ loved, and that's very likely the Apostle John that's being talked about at this moment, and he says, "Woman." Now, I know in this day and age, if I called my mother woman, I would get slapped in the next week probably, because you don't refer to someone as woman, especially not your mother. But during this period of time, this was actually a term of endearment. He wasn't making a slight at his mother. He was speaking to her in an endearing, comforting way by referring to her like this. Mother, woman, John will take care of you in your old age. John, I turn the care of my mother over to you. Treat her well. And at that very moment, John took her away from the scene of the cross to his very own home. And then the sixth hour comes. This would have been about noon our time. From that time till about 3 in the afternoon, there was darkness over the land. And there was a question about this last week. And in my studies, some individuals have said, well, this was probably an eclipse. And I'm going to say I don't rightly know that this was an eclipse, and here's why. Because when the Passover was celebrated, the moon was full. Now, that doesn't mean that God couldn't have miraculously taken the moon back around or even slowed the moon down to take care of those things. But when we read of the fact that there was darkness covering the land, I don't believe this was a situation where, yes, when the moon is covering the sun, it's a little dark, but it's not really that dark. There's a difference, but it's discernible, but it's not great. The idea of darkness here is that it got dark. I think this was more of a miraculous thing that we probably won't ever see again in this lifetime. Because God can do things like that go beyond the laws of science. If in the book of Joshua, he's able to slow the sun down for a period of time so that the Israelites can take care of their enemies, he could make it where the sun is darkened in a miraculous way for a period of time. And again, I've heard people try to argue, well, I've gone through the lunar cycle and da-da-da-da-da-da, and I know for a fact we need to be careful about things like that. Because I've literally had a preacher, not a member of the church, but a preacher tell me, hey, I know for a fact it was at this time because of, and he went through all of this stuff. It could have been a lunar eclipse, or it could have been a solar eclipse rather, but it also could have been something miraculous. I would just say the Bible tells us that a darkness covered the land. Let's kind of leave it at that. As we're going to notice in the next section that we're going to be studying, it was at this time, during this period, that the veil of the temple was torn in two. So now, Christ has the opportunity to speak once again. And so far, all that he said has focused around others. It's focused around God. And now he says, Scripture. My God, why have you forsaken me? He's quoting from Psalm 22, verse 1. And it's interesting, if you take the time to study through Psalm 22 and you study through the events that are occurring here, a lot of what you read in that psalm occurs in his death here. And we've even pointed out a verse or two as far as they wagged their heads, they mocked me. Those are all things that happened to Christ. And this is an expression of deep suffering that he has right now. And I'm going to go ahead and say, in my studies, I don't think it's really easy to have this cut and dry approach to, well, we know exactly what he means by the fact that God had forsaken him. And there's a lot of different ideas there. Because God approved of what Christ was doing. The Savior was innocent of any wrongdoing. He had done nothing to forfeit the favor of God. But I would pose these just few ideas. One, at this moment, God couldn't intervene in what was occurring because God's will had to be done. Christ had to die on the cross so that mankind could have their sins forgiven. And so in that way, as God doesn't intervene in this, it could be said to an extent that God forsook Christ. I would also say, and this is personal opinion, and take that for exactly what it is, personal opinion. I also wonder if through, I guess we'll say inspiration, so to speak, Christ is speaking up and speaking out right now to try to guide the Jewish people who are right in front of him, who are witnessing this, exactly to one thing. Everything that you're doing to me, everything that's happening right now, all of this is occurring according to the Scriptures. Because as I said, if you study Psalm 22, which was written by David, and written by David about his own experiences, there's a lot there that mirrors what Jesus went through. In fact, let's take a quick look at Psalm 22. We're not going to do an extensive study of it, but we'll just kind of do a read through. And as I'm reading through it, I want you to think about what all Jesus went through that David talks about here. It's 31 verses, so it'll take a few moments, but just think about it. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? Why art thou so far from helping me, and from the words of my roaring? O my God, I cry in the daytime, but thou hearest me not, and in the night season I am not silent. But thou art holy, O thou that inhabitest the praises of Israel. Our fathers trusted in thee. They trusted, and thou didst deliver them. They cried unto thee, and were delivered. They trusted in thee, and were not confounded. But I am a worm, and no man, a reproach of men, and despised of all people. And they that see me laugh me to scorn. They shoot out the lip. They shake the head, saying, He trusted on the Lord that he would deliver him. Let him deliver him, seeing he delighted in him. Sound familiar? But thou art he that took me out of the womb. Thou didst make me hope when I was upon my mother's breast. I was cast upon thee from the womb. Thou art my God. From my mother's belly, be not far from me, for trouble is near. For there is none to help. Many bulls have compassed me. Strong bulls of Bashan have beset me around. They gaped upon me with their mouths as a ravening and roaring lion. I'm poured out like water, and my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted in the midst of my bowels. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue cleaveth to my jaws. What is it that Jesus is going to say in just a few minutes? I thirst. And thou hast brought me into the dust of death, for dogs have compassed me. The assembly of the wicked have enclosed me. They pierced my hands and my feet. I may tell on my bones. They look and stare upon me. They part my garments among them and cast lots upon my vesture. We read of the Romans doing that. But be thou not far from me. O my Lord, O my strength, haste to help me. Deliver my soul from the sword, my darling from the power of the dog. Save me from the lion's mouth, for thou hast heard me from the horns of the unicorn. I will declare thy name unto my brethren. In the midst of the congregation will I praise thee. Ye that fear the Lord, praise him. All ye the seed of Jacob, glorify him and fear him. All ye seed of Israel, for he hath not despised nor abhorred the affliction of the afflicted. Neither hath he hid his face from him, but when he cried unto him, he heard. My praise shall be of thee in the great congregation. I will pay my vows before them that hear him. The meek shall eat and be satisfied. They shall praise the Lord and seek him. Your heart shall live forever. All the ends of the world shall remember and turn unto the Lord, and all the kindreds of the nations shall worship before thee. For the kingdom is the Lord's, and he is the governor among the nations. All they that be fat upon the earth shall eat and worship. All they that go down to the dust shall bow before him, and none shall keep alive his own soul. A seed shall serve him. It shall be accounted to the Lord for a generation. They shall come and shall declare his righteousness unto a people that shall be born, that he hath done this. You notice how that it begins in sorrow and terror, and how does it end? In great hope. The crucifixion of Jesus begins where? How's it going to end? With great hope for the people, doesn't it? Even with his death, what did his death account for us? And like I said, we just did a quick cursory reading, but how many things did you catch that I didn't even point out that occurred to Jesus that David writes about here? It's very much a parallel to a large extent, isn't it? I think one of the things he's doing is he's trying to point the Jewish people in one last word or one last statement that everything that happened is happening according to the Scriptures. You mean it to be death and destruction, but God is going to bring great hope out of this event. And like I said, that's an opinion. I don't, push that as doctrine, but it's one of my views behind it. God had to let him die in this instance and could not intervene. And that way, God forsook Christ. But also the fact that he's using this to point uh, the Jewish people to the will of God. Now, obviously, in the moment, people wouldn't get it. They wouldn't understand. Because some claim, well, he's calling for Elijah. They're still mocking him. This is a taunt because the universal belief was the fact that Elijah would come down before the Christ. And in their mind, Elijah had not come yet. But the scriptures tells us that this Elijah was who? John the Baptist. They did not believe that. And so their statement is essentially, well, God's not going to help him. Maybe Elijah's going to come down and take him off the cross. So they're continuing to mock him. And Christ's next words are probably the closest thing to selfishness that he would give. And I'm not saying he was selfish in stating this. I'm just saying that this might be considered the closest thing to it. It's not. But he says, I thirst. And immediately there's one that came to him. They took a sponge filled with vinegar. This would have been a sour wine mixed with water. This was often drunk by the Roman soldiers during the crucifixion. This sponge was placed on a large hyssop branch. Some translations will say that it was a large branch. Some will say it was a hyssop. And it's because it was just a large, sturdy branch that could be used. And it was extended up to the mouth of Jesus. This he accepted because remember, we said the first drink was intended to stupefy the senses. It was intended to kind of numb the body so that the pain of the cross wouldn't be as bad. He didn't accept that. He accepted this. Others continue their mocking at this point to say, no, don't give him anything to drink. Let's see if Elijah actually does come down for him. Jesus gives one more statement before he dies. It is finished. It was filled with deep groanings. It was filled with intensity of pain. And finally he said, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. And with that, he dies. So that is the crucifixion, as we are shown in the scriptures. And so we need to get to the questions in this. We're going to start with Louis Joe. If you would you start us out this morning with page 48, section 12, question 1. All right, this is Jesus, King of the Jews, number 2. That's right, the chief priest, number 3. All right, 2 thieves, number 4. Transgressors, correct. Number 5. That's correct, the thief said that. Number 6. Yes, ma'am. All right, number 7. All right, darkness, number 8. Pilate. All right, number 9. All right, Greek, Latin, and Hebrew, correct. Number 10. You're okay. Hey, the verse reference is important too. You're good. Take your time. Yeah, they requested that it not happen. Was it gain? The next part says, was it gain? It's okay. Did they get their wish? No, they didn't. That's correct. Number 11. No, you're fine. You're fine. All right. And with that, you had mocking. You had one of them realize that he was innocent, they were not, and the request to remember that one thief when they come into the kingdom. And Jesus had made the statement, "You'll be with me today in paradise." Uh, like I said, if you got the verses written down, that's completely fine. Number 12. They misunderstood him. I think that's a good explanation. Number 13. 4. And they divided one of his garments into 4 pieces. That's correct. All right. Number 14. It was gambled as a whole piece. Correct. Number 15. 3. Number 16. That's right. We think it was John. Number 17. All right. Correct. And number 18. Uh, Sharon. Shirt was torn from top to bottom. All right. So that brings us to section 13, the supernatural phenomena, where we're going to discuss some other events that took place right after the death of Jesus and the response that some had when this occurred. And sir, okay, we can do the true false. I didn't think we did those, but we can. Um, I think John Hart, that would put you number 1 to the true false. That's correct. That's true. Number 2. All right. Okay. Number 4. All right. Number 5. That is false. And one thing to always remember is that God did often use wicked people to fulfill Scripture, but that did not change their salvation. That's something that people have talked about before. Um, God can use wicked people in order to bring about His will, but at the end of the day, their salvation state doesn't change. They have to be willing to do what God has said, and that's always something to remember. So now we go to the supernatural phenomena, and we're going to start with Matthew 27, verses 51 through 56. And like we've been doing, we'll read about 3 verses at a time. and yes, sir. Sorry. Okay. Mhm. I think the same thing. I think it was viewed as kind of a trophy piece that, as far as they have a souvenir of this, and probably I hate to word it this way, probably a story that they could tell fondly and joke about with other individuals, kind of like sometimes we have what's called a conversation piece, like, the coffee table or something else, someone sees that, oh, what's that? And then I kind of feel like not only is that a trophy, but they could have used that as some sort of conversation piece to discuss the various things that transpired leading up to his crucifixion. Um, but yeah, this would have been a souvenir, a trophy of the event, and there's no telling how many of these the soldiers may have kept. Just as kind of like bragging rights. Well, I was at the crucifixion, and oh, this belonged to such and such thief or such and such person. I would not doubt that in the least bit, and I think that's a good point to make, and that's true. You know, okay, I'm going to springboard off of that real quick. Did you know that the most valuable toilet in the world is in New Jersey at a mechanic shop? And I'm getting a lot of looks right now. How did this go into a toilet? Do you know who owned that toilet at one time? It was from a yacht that was owned by Adolf Hitler, and now it's in a mechanic shop in New Jersey. What I'm saying is there's value that's attached to certain things based on who owned it. And so there is a chance that they may have looked at this garment as a valuable piece and a way to gain money. Well, wouldn't you want this piece of garment that once belonged to Jesus of Nazareth? There's a chance they could have done that. Because I think that may have been where you're going with it, is kind of like you see someone like going to a pawn shop to kind of pawn off, well, this was once owned by, this was signed by Michael Jordan, something of that nature. It could be the case. And it's, if you read through, I think it's Antiquities of the Jews by Josephus. Josephus, you hear people talking about how the ark had already been found, or never been found, and we're going to find the ark. According to Josephus in Antiquities of the Jews, that the ark had been found a long time ago, and they took it down piece by piece and sold the parts of it as kind of um, what sort of like protection from evil. And again, if that's true, it may have been the case that there was all of these rumors and these thoughts that might be attached to it. And you even consider, as far as the Catholics have quote unquote holy relics that they have hidden away that they claim belong to either Jesus or Paul or Peter or someone else. You have a lot of superstition that's attached to these items. It might be the case that one of the Roman soldiers would try to take advantage of that based on who owned it, based on the fact that humanity, to a large degree, whether they believe it or not, is superstitious. And I don't, mean that we're superstitious because we're religious, but just in general. And the misinformation that would be attached to this, yeah, I can see that as being a possibility. So all of what's been mentioned may be a reason why the Romans, these soldiers, are so keen to get a piece of his clothing, or even to gamble on who would receive a whole piece of clothing. So those are things to bear in mind. I know those things may not necessarily save our souls at the end of the day, but those are things to bear in mind when we study through this, trying to sometimes look at the why someone would do things. Any other thoughts or comments? Yes, sir. That is true. Hmm. Hmm. And there would be a lot of truth attached to that as well. That there's a lot of ways you could make money off of this, and that kind of goes back to when people, if Josephus' story is true, when they were trying to sell off pieces of the ark, it'd be easier to do it, or better to do it piece by piece than trying to sell the whole boat. But that's true. There is the possibility they could have tried to cut it down into smaller pieces for maximized profit. So, any other thoughts or comments? I appreciate the comments and discussion. All right. If not, we're in Matthew 27, verses 51 through 56. I am not sure who reads next, but I know it's over this. Okay. All right. We need to move to the over this way now. Louis Joe. All right. And so now we move to Mark 15:38 through 41. Mark 15:38 through 41, and I guess we'll just Susan, if you just read all four of those. To verse 41. All right, now we're going to Luke 43, verse 45, and verse 47 through 49. All right. I don't know if we're going to finish this today, but if not, it's okay. Luke reminds us about the darkening of the sun, and we've already discussed this. We also read of the fact that there was a great earthquake which occurred. And as this earthquake is going on, the veil in the most holy that separated the holy place from the most holy place tore from top to bottom. Exodus 26 verses 31 through 33 reminds us that this veil was what kept the two, you know, uh, separated. We're actually going to talk a little bit more about that in the sermon this morning. I didn't plan for this. It's just kind of funny happenstance how that sometimes happens. This would have been around the time of the day where the priests would have been burning incense, and so there would have been witnesses to this miraculous fact. Now, we read that the earth shook, and very likely an earthquake, and Albert Barnes writes of the fact that this was possibly a very large earthquake because Roman writers have mentioned the fact that they felt the earth move in other countries around this time, very far out from Jerusalem. So this may have been a very large earthquake in scale. We know it was large because we read that the rocks were torn into pieces, and the word rocks here wouldn't mean what we think of it like, rocks. We're talking about large boulders that are just torn into pieces. So this is a very strong earthquake. During this earthquake, the graves or sepulchres are opened up. This would have been caves that had been carved into the side of stone walls and rocks, and these were used to house the dead. When these tore open, we're told that the bodies of dead saints arose, that they got out of their tombs, and they made themselves known to others. This was probably individuals who were well known in Jerusalem because of the fact that you have people who died like 100 years ago. They may not have been well known, at least to the people who were alive at this time. But if you had individuals who may have recently died and suddenly, grandma's walking around, that's a big thing. You have the darkening of the sun. You have the events that took place as far as the things that were said as Jesus died. You have the great earthquake. You have the graves opening up. And we'll cover at least one reaction real quick. There's focus with the centurion and his band. The centurion was the captain over 100 soldiers. He was placed with his band likely to guard over the event of the crucifixion to make sure that no one came to try to rescue anyone who was in the process of dying. They made sure that no one interfered with the death sentence. How did the band react? We're told that the band reacted when they feared greatly. And one thing to remember, and I'm purposely separating the band from the centurion for a specific reason. The band, or rather the centurion, did something we're not told that his soldiers did. So the soldiers, when they were told they feared greatly, I think they thought the way a lot of pagans did at the time. If any major storm, any major natural disaster occurred, anything of that happened, they thought the gods were angry. They thought the gods were about ready to rain down wrath upon them for something they did wrong. And so a lot of times during this period, pagans would start offering sacrifices, so to speak, giving gifts to their gods, thinking, I don't know what I did to make you angry, but here, maybe this will appease you. I think that's the mindset that the Roman soldiers had, because while the King James says this must be the Son of God, other translations have this by what the Greek has it rendered, this must be a Son of God. As in, this must be the son of one of our gods. We killed the wrong person. So I don't think the band feared God, but I am going to go ahead and say this, and Billy can elaborate on this, or the centurion did something different. He said this must be the Son of God, but he also said, or also did what? Glorified God. But we're going to have to stop here. As always, I appreciate everyone's kind attention. I appreciate everyone who has asked questions, made comments, read, answered questions. I greatly appreciate those things. You have no idea. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and have a word of prayer.